Alana Newhouse, thank you for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
Is anti-Zionism of the type that we're seeing ascend on the left and the right in America today, um, is it a kind of envy?
For some people, it is, I think.
What
Yeah.
are they envious of?
I think that they are envious of a country that seems to have permission to defend itself, permission to take care of its own people, permission to be happy, and permission to have what used to be a widely enjoyed idea of national identity and sovereignty.
Permission to define themselves.
Yes.
It does seem like, particularly on the right, a lot of the anti-Zionism is a reaction to a culture that cannot define itself. What is the appropriate way for a country or for a culture to define itself?
I think it's different for every culture. I think that um, one of the things that I find interesting and that I've been exploring a little bit is the idea that cultures are, by definition, different from one another. And the metaphor that I use is that culture is a mixing board,
Hmm.
and different countries raise the dials up or down on different features. And so, for example, in Japan, race is a central part of Japanese culture. It's important in Japan. Race functions a specific way in that country and in its national culture. In Israel, race is not actually a dominant feature. In fact, it's virtually irrelevant. That doesn't mean that race as a concept in national cultures is not relevant. It means that different countries have made their cultures defined differently. And so what I find really interesting at this, especially at this moment that we're in now, is to watch as countries try to redefine themselves and redefine their cultures.
So you say it's a mixing board, like a sound mixing board,
Mhm.
and that exactly what it means to be a culture. It's not just a matter of how much of one thing or how much of another. It's almost, in some cases, different things altogether. Israel is obviously a multi-ethnic because Jews are multi-ethnic, and Israel is primarily defined as the Jewish state, the homeland of Jews on earth. That necessarily means that there's going to be Sephardic Jews and Ashkenazi Jews, right? People of Middle Eastern descent, to people of European descent. There's going to be people from Ethiopia. There's going to be people from all over the world who still meet that criteria. Um, to your point, in Japan, race very important. One of the things I loved in your essay, Zionism for Everyone, which is really what made me want to have this conversation. I thought it was such a unique perspective. Is you talk about how um, an Anglo-American, an American of European extraction going to Japan and speaking fluent Japanese would be met like a talking dog, like they wouldn't understand what they were witnessing. Um, Conversely, if somebody if a couple from France moved to America and had a child, and that child never learned to speak French and never visited France, they would be no more French than they would not be identified by anyone in France as being French at all. What is an American? Because we're not really a race. We're not a language. We're not. What are we?
So, America is an incredibly fascinating and, in some senses, um, r- in my telling of American history and how I understand it, America is very, very special. And part of the reason why America is special is because it decidedly wasn't made up of people who had anything in common. That's actually one of the features of our origin story. And so then where does culture come from?
Hmm.
And I know that there's been this very, very tortured conversation, particularly in the last couple of years, about what American culture is and what does it mean to be American. One of the things that I have always been struck by are these two tethers that I think the founders essentially developed or set down, which can roughly be boiled down to capitalism and covenant. They are very weird. They are profoundly strange tethers. But it turned out that it worked.
So what are they?
The tethers are um, one, you can come here and you can get rich.
Hmm.
You can have a life as a non-royal. You can have a life that's very successful. You can do better here than you could in many of your home countries. And for all of American history, that was one of the promises of this land, that in some way, this country was going to enrich your life. And the other tether was covenant, was the idea that America was exceptional, and that exceptionalism was driven by a relationship to God. America was chosen by God to be a new Jerusalem. Whether you believe in the Hebrew Bible, in the New Testament, if you believe that America is chosen or not, is kind of irrelevant. The idea is that the country saw that as part of its identity, and that had consequences historically and emotionally for the people who lived here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that all of our legal tender says "God bless America" on it. Those are things that we take for granted as just being, maybe ubiquitous in the world. They're not. That's not at all ubiquitous. That's a part of America's attempt to form a national identity out of, as you say, the disparate groups that came here. It's easy to see America as being English because so much. I mean, the original settlers in what were the original 13 colonies, not the original settlers on the continent, but the original settlers in the what became the 13 founding states were all English colonies. You had English was the language that was primarily spoken by the majority of people here. You had a tradition in British common law, which really helped to define, and parliamentary law, which all sort of helped define the structures of American civic life in the beginning. But immigration quickly, European immigration primarily, quickly overwhelmed English
Mhm.
immigration. The part of the country I'm from was founded by German Catholics, and I think there were probably more people of German extraction during the mass immigration era, certainly, than there were English. And then, of course, you had the Irish come over, you had the Italians come over, and they all, now looking back through the lens of like late 20th century um, mass Hollywood race consciousness, it's easy to say, well, those people were white. Okay, fair enough. But that wasn't how they saw themselves at that time. White wasn't an ethnicity. A German had no more in common with an Italian, than I have with the man on the moon. These were very defined civilizations at that time. It's also hard. There's this kind of normalization bias. You've written in past essays about and spoken extensively on the sort of flattening of society technologically, and therefore culturally. And we look back now through that vantage, and it's
Mhm.
easy to superimpose it onto the past too, right?
Yeah.
But it was not a flat European. You hear the sort of right wing um, post liberals now who will talk about like European Christian culture,
Yeah.
as though there was any such thing as European Christian culture, when what there really were very distinct groups of people with very distinct languages and very distinct histories across that continent who were at war with each other for millennia, basically. And they somehow all were able to come here and forge something that was out of many one, that was e pluribus unum.
I I I've written about this, and I try to bring it up at every chance I get, mainly I guess to annoy everyone around me. But I really love this. Um, it's a feature film called Saints and Strangers, and
I've
it's
never seen
about
it.
it's really incredible. It's I think 5 hours, and it's about the establishment of the country, and the basic idea behind it is that the groups, the people who founded this country and who came here actually were from two different cohorts with two different motivations.
Mhm.
There were people who were coming here for money, and there were people who were coming here because of God. But the message of the project is really that difference, and in some senses conflict, was baked in to this effort. And part of the reason why I like it is because I am hot on difference. I really find difference to be enlivening and exciting. And I find the flattening that happens both on the left and the right to be deadening. And on the left, you have the flat. I mean, actually, right now, let's say the left and the right are both talking about white culture. Both of them do.
That's right.
One is as evil and one is as the ideal and the pure, perfect thing. And in both cases, they're flattening enormous distinctions that are the stuff of life. And one of the things that I think I was trying to get at with my essay is that tendency is what's running writ large over nations right now, is this tendency. And again, I don't even know if people really know what they're doing, and I don't know if they know what they're taking part in. But when you talk about, I definitely think that people on the left believe that they're valorizing difference. They are so tolerant, right? The people on the right think they're valorizing white culture or European culture. But actually, what they're both doing is um, they're leeching actual history and actual culture of its power.
Hmm.
French is different than Italian, and it is different than German, and it is different than British. And once you decide that they are all one thing, you actually remove what's special about each one of them. Once you decide that Italian immigrants were the same as German immigrants, were the same as the Jews, were the same as the Irish, you actually remove what was special. And I think, I mean, my whole thing is that I think it's a lot of this conversation, the conversations on both the right and the left are driven by technology, but the effect is the same. And it's to drain our discourse of power.
So you talk about you're hot on difference. You're hot on the things that make people particular.
Mm-hmm.
And in Zionism, it's easy to see particularity on full display. I mean, in the Bible, God sets the Jews apart. I mean, that's kind of the whole idea of being Jewish, as I understand it, is to not be everybody else. That's like the rule number one of being Jewish: don't be not Jewish.
That's the gig.
And yet, there is something to the idea of America as a melting pot. There is something to the idea that yes, I reject the idea of white Christian culture being what Europe was. Of course, Europe was Italian culture and German culture, and all of these distinct peoples across a distinct, geography with distinct language and distinct music and distinct food and distinct history. They all come over here, though, and it seems to me that the modern left has suggested that they each should have sort of continued being as they were here in a kind of uninterrupted otherness. But America is also a nation, and a nation has to have its own cultural identity. There has to be something that makes America is the size of a continent. It's
Right.
one of the largest landmass countries that exists. What makes a Dutch immigrant to the Pacific Northwest have anything at all in common with a Spanish immigrant to South Florida whose ancestors came here 500 years ago? What makes them both an American? There must surely be something where you have to have some kind of flattening, or if not flattening, evolution into something that may very well be distinct. Maybe there is a distinct thing called Americanness, but it has to take on its own flavor, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. I think that again, these conversations can get really, really interesting if you get really focused and really deep, right? So you have a narrow and deep conversation about a specific country, and that's where it starts to get super interesting. And America is, in many ways, it's a really, really different conversation to have about America than it is to have about Europe, which European countries emerged just really differently and at a different time. One of the things about America, in addition to all the other weird things about America, another thing about America is that I love American history, but we kind of eat the past. Like We're a
Indeed, we do.
really forward-looking country. It's a future-oriented nation. And even when that means completely chewing through whatever just happened and forgetting it, that's how we move forward. It's actually just a weird cultural feature. How do you quantify that? How do you make that cultural? How do you make that part of your cultural definition? Well, one of the ways that we did that, and one of the ways that made the 20th century in America so powerful, was mass media.
Mm,
We created mirrors. There was a thing called public opinion, which is a made up idea, right? That
right.
only exists because of the technologies, when technologies can produce it, right? So we now have the ability to have a national public opinion because we have national media. We create television, we create television stars. Those television stars, a Walter Cronkite can speak to somebody in Nebraska as well as in California, as well as in Massachusetts. It's incredibly bizarre if you look at the history of humans, right? And then on top of that, you start to get Hollywood and you get movies telling America, mirroring back to America, the American story, the American identity, American culture. All of these things were part and parcel of the creation of the idea of an American culture and American identity that you and I grew up with.
Mhm.
And it changes, and we're changing now. And we're going to sit here, hopefully, in 20 years, and we're going to realize that there was a new American culture and a new American identity that was being forged at a time of technological flux, which is when it happens. So I'm not able to really give you an answer, in part because I'm watching it happen and emerge just like you are.
Yeah.
And I don't think that this is one of those countries where a backwards look will help us that much.
One of the things that you talk about in your piece is Zionism as technology,
Yeah.
both the need for Zionism as a reaction to the flattening of technology, but Zionism itself as an exportable technology or a replicable technology
Hmm.
by other nations. And in your piece, which I'll let you speak for, I won't summarize it overly. But you use France as an example. You use Japan as an example, as we covered here. You use Argentina uh, as an example at one point, um, as as evidence that both, as you call it, ethnos, the heart of the ethno state, which maybe we might call culture,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
what makes you whatever makes you a people,
Hmm.
not necessarily ethnic in the sense that we tend to use the word in the modern
Correct.
vernacular,
Correct.
as I understand, but something cultural. It does seem like America exists as a kind of exception to the framework, though. In I don't want to. I want to get to everything that I think is great about the framework because I think obviously that's what inspired me to want to have a conversation with you. But I did struggle in reading the piece to fully know how it applies here. And yet there is obviously something that does also exist and create ethnos here because in this exact same size of a country or size of a geographical uh, you know continent, you could have France and Germany and the Netherlands and Italy and all of that in Europe. All of that exists in a
Mhm.
relatively similarly sized geographical location. Incredibly disparate cultures, and yet in America, perhaps because of how we were settled, when we were settled, um, we didn't have those distinctions, and we did create something more homogenous. And if there is if America is also an ethno state, or if America could benefit from being an ethno state, it does become trickier to define the ethnos is for us.
Okay. So to start with, I should explain that I don't use the term ethnostate the way that it's
Yes.
popularly used, in part because I'm not, the root of the term as I'm defining it is not ethnicity, which is being part of a broad bloodline, sharing a bloodline, but is actually ethnos, which in anthropology is a term for people,
Yeah.
a people or a culture. And to take it back to the beginning, again, the idea is that culture gets defined differently by different people
Hmm.
with different, you can use whatever metaphor you like. I like the metaphor of the mixing board. You can use the metaphor of ingredients. There are tons of different metaphors that you can use. The bottom line is that there are a set number of features that different countries or different sets of people calibrate to create their unique culture. The only real requirements are that the particular thing you make is different than other people's thing around you, that your music sounds different from theirs, and that it's recognizable to the people inside of your culture and to others as yours, right? So if you think about music, the creation of music, you are making a song. That song is different than other people's songs, and it is recognizable as yours by your own people and by others. Now, if you use that definition, which is deliberately expansive,
Right.
at that point, you can start to see how America can fit into it, and America does, in my conception, because America took, and in the case of this country, I think that again, this idea of exceptionalism and capitalism
Hmm.
were these new instruments. They added 2 instruments to the mixing board, and they turned the dial all the way up on those. It was like they invented rock music. They just made a completely new music in the panel of world music at the time. That is a culture. It doesn't look like European, it doesn't look like European culture or like French culture or like German culture in the way that those things may or may not resemble each other. But that was what was so radical.
Hmm.
It wasn't just that they moved away from that continent. They moved away in their heads. They like made something completely different that is still a culture. It is still a people, and it was still recognizable as American. Not only was it recognizable as American by them and by our neighbors, it's recognizable as American by the entire world. Billions of people export it.
Right.
They want the thing that is definably American. They can recognize it in a minute, right? McDonald's arches are American. So when you look at that and you say to yourself, I don't know what that was. We have to find language for that. That was a culture. These things become American culture. And I know it because we can feel it. And I know it because others can recognize it.
So a culture is sort of defined from within.
Mm-hmm.
A people plays a large role in defining themselves. It's a kind of self-deterministic view of culture. But also it's externally at least recognized.
Mm-hmm.
And probably those external boundaries help it to be internally defined in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying this is good. It's a good world when French are different than Italian. You're not only uh, diagnosing something, you're prescribing something. You're saying that it's good for the world for the French to be French. It's good for the world for the Italian to be Italian. It's good for the world for the Israeli to be the Israeli. It's good for the world for America to be America.
Well, what I'm saying is I tend not to tell anybody else what's good for them. I try not to. Um, what I would say is that when I look at people who are unhappy, and people who don't know why their country feels unmoored, and who feel themselves questioning of their own identity and their own place in their culture, I can explain why they feel that way. And they can choose to do whatever they want with it, right? I do feel that part of what I am seeing now is a deep unhappiness.
Hmm.
And that unhappiness globally feels rooted inside of a confusion about national identity. So I was trying to describe what I think someone's problem is, and they can decide what to do about it.
So, how does Zionism present? How is it exportable technology or replicable technology? How does it offer a solution to this unhappiness that you perceive in the world?
Zionism has two rough parts in my generalized definition of it that I try to lay out in the piece. One is this idea of cultural particularism
Mhm.
and being able to define what you are. I don't care what the definition is. I don't care how much trombone you use versus how much drums. I don't care what your actual definition is, but you need to have one. And inside of that, you need to have one for your dominant culture. Inside of that, once you have that, then you have to be future oriented, incredibly pragmatic, hardworking, but future oriented, idealistic.
Mm.
So if you want, you can just literally, it's like a formula: particularism plus pragmatism plus idealism. And that's Zionism. And that's the formula that a small set of people used to establish a country 78 years ago. And it worked. And I think it would work for the revivification of countries as much as it would work for the establishment of one.
You say it works because Israel came into existence, but other nations came into existence in the early 20th century as well. Uh, and many of them don't have ethnos. Iraq is an example of a country that was formed in some ways by the same group of people making the same kinds of, internationally, the same groups of people making the same kinds of decisions, drawing lines on maps that hadn't necessarily existed in those ways before. But in the case of Iraq, there is no national culture. There's no ethnos. It's not an ethnos state.
Mhm.
It contains at least three very, very different people groups. What what makes Israel work as a culture? You point to these three things. This formulation, this formula. How do you see those three things on display in Israel, and why do you identify those as the three things that make Israel work? And I suppose while I'm inclined to agree with you, I don't want to assume everybody watching is. On what level do we just say Israel works? Like,
Okay, right.
how do we arrive at Israel works?
Right. So let's hold my feet to the fire on the first premise, which is that Israel actually works.
Right.
Right. Okay. So I am going to. There are four questions that I ask, um, which I lay out in the piece, that I think are questions that any country should ask itself right now. The first is: are your people happy? Basic happiness indexes. Are they happy? Israeli population, um, routinely is high up on happiness indexes, even though the country is frequently involved in violent wars.
Hmm.
Okay, so it's happy. Two, do you have babies? Babies are the way that you vote for the future. It's the way that you say that you believe that you're going to have a future, is to have kids. And Israel right now is the exception in Western countries of being above replacement level. They have babies.
Unbelievable.
Three,
Unbelievable that you could say they're the exception because they are reproducing.
that's right. Three, can you defend yourself?
Hmm.
People that can't or won't defend themselves tend not to survive. Kind of just basic, obvious thing, right? I note in the piece, and it's an anecdote that I think deserves more attention than it gets. In the recent fighting in Iran, the head of the Air Force was not in some office. He wasn't in headquarters. He wasn't in a bunker. He was in the skies with his pilots fighting. That is the culture of this country. Everyone fights. That is important. And the fourth thing is, are you future oriented? Can you face the next technological or usually technological advance that's coming at you? And right now we're facing an AI revolution. That revolution will benefit certain profiles of people. It will benefit people who are who know how to take advantage of those technologies and who don't succumb to the technologies, who don't become basically zombie food. Like they're not, right? And also people who can work quickly and recombinate quickly into small, lithe, functional teams. Okay, so Israel has a population, half of whom have served in an army, done some sort of army training or service. A whole other chunk of whom sit around and read an obscure legal document all day. And who constantly have to forge themselves into teams in both instances.
Right.
If I told you you had to be the head of a country on the cusp of the AI revolution, would you want to be the head of a country of 100 million people who have an immigration problem, an education problem, a crisis of national identity? Or do you want to be the head of a country of 10 million people, half of whom actually know how to serve in an army, half of whom actually are know this incredibly arcane document, and all of whom constantly work on teams together?
Yeah.
So to me, the argument about Israeli success feels worth questioning. It's certainly worth asking, and that's my answer to it.
There are two things that that Tucker Carlson has said, one of which is true and one of which is so obviously false. The one that's true is he says, I don't begrudge Israel looking after its interests. I wish our country would look after its own. Now, that is true. He's using it to say something that's untrue. He's using it to imply something that is untrue. But certainly it does speak to the kind of envy, he resents that Israel has a culture and is willing to defend that culture and is willing to prioritize that culture. And then he says a thing that's false, which is Israel obviously couldn't exist at all without America. And America has been a great friend to Israel and has, helped Israel to punch well above what would otherwise be its weight. But is there any country doing more to ensure its own survival anywhere in the world than Israel, with or without the support of America / or anybody? It strikes me that the answer is so obviously no. That is what is unique. Perhaps the most unique thing about Israel right now is that it is going to survive at all costs. I mean, that's its sort of fundamental mission. And you can say, well, that's the fundamental mission of any nation, but I'm not sure that every nation knows that that's their fundamental mission at this point.
And I think that that's part of the benefit of having that cultural conversation, which is like, it's sometimes important to say things out loud.
Mm.
You see that in your marriage, you see it in your relationship with your kids. Sometimes it's important to say things out loud that feel obvious to you, because you may realize that the people that you're in a project with aren't on the same page. And in terms of the Israel-America conversation, I never know which target I'm meant to hit, right? Is it that Israel couldn't exist without America? Is it that Israel controls America? I can't ever quite follow, in part because I think those conversations are not designed to be followable.
No.
They're designed to be confusing, and they're designed to be demoralizing, frankly, of Americans. I don't think the target of that, I don't even think that that conversation is meant to isolate Jews. I think the conversation on both the left and the right around Israel is meant to demoralize Americans. And,
Absolutely.
that feels, so then when you look at it that way, you're like, well, it's hard for me. I can't bat that one around, because it just seems like I'm trying to shoot an arrow into jelly. So I can't.
Yeah, well, it is. the entire black pill movement is a way of getting people to be fearful of the future so that they don't participate in building the future.
The thing that, in that formula, the thing everybody yada yadas over is the idealism part. It's really, really important. It's really, really, you can't make it work. Nationalism does not work on its own. If it's past oriented nationalism, we're going to revive the glory of X. Doesn't work. You have to tell people what you're going to build for in the future, that we are meeting something amazing and new that's going to be great.
Mm.
And you can honor, respect, build off of the past. But if you don't inspire people to that their tomorrow is going to be better than today, I don't know that actually you can sustain any kind of nation building or nation reviving project. It's part of my criticism of a lot of the conservative parties in Europe and impulses in the conservative in right-wing spaces in America too. These places feel really dark and they feel depressing.
Yeah.
Because it feels like it's only meant to animate something that once was. And while I love history and I want us to honor our history and I want us to honor our legacies and our past and our traditions, I don't know that you're going to ever inspire people to build for the future or to have babies if you don't show them that there is something to look forward to.
Yeah. One of the reasons I think that, particularly among the youngest cohort in the country, 50% of them are skeptical of the moon landing. And the reason that in the 1960s everyone accepted the reality of the moon landing, and in the 2020s, young people in particular don't believe in the moon landing. Nothing has changed. We have the same amount of lunar rock samples that were collected on the moon because the laser reflectors are still up on the moon that you can. Uh, Satellites have taken pictures of the landings. It's all the photos, all the photographic evidence exists. The fundamental change is that in the 1960s, the attitudinal premise of the entire country was, of course, America can land on the moon. I mean, we may not know how yet in 1963, but by 1969 we'll figure that out. And we'll be on Saturn by 70, which was an actual expression at the time, Saturn by 70, because America in the 1960s was a country that, within living memory, had discovered powered flight, had broken the sound barrier, had won 2 world wars, had split the atom, had put a man in space. Um, the moon landing was a part of a natural progression of optimism, a natural progression of a belief that America could build the future. And so, even if you were a farmer in rural West Texas, where I'm from, who didn't know anything about physics, didn't know anything about the how, yeah, if America puts its mind on going to the moon, it's going to go to the moon. And so then when America goes to the moon, you're able to accept that. Today, a generation who has been the recipient of all of those great accomplishments of the past, technological primarily, but let's not act like technology just means a screen in your pocket. It means a billion people lifted out of poverty. It means a world without war, disease, poverty, and death as a part of the day-to-day experience of the average person in the West. Uh, that group of people is skeptical of the moon landing. Why? If anything, you would think, well, with all the technology around them, they would believe we can do anything, but they don't. In part because they've been being told by both left and right for their entire lives that either America can't, America shouldn't, um, America is so fundamentally flawed and so fundamentally evil that it shouldn't. Um, and so their reaction to the great accomplishments of the past is, well, no, there's just no way that could have happened. It's not the evidence hasn't shifted at all. Only the attitude, only identity, and what you believe about yourself and what you believe about ourselves as a people. That's the only thing that's changed.
I would add to that I feel that the technologies, particularly social media technologies, have created a situation where you have a population with strong opinions thinly held,
Hmm.
right? So again, in some senses, I might make the argument that our digital culture is like the most American invention we ever invented because it was like, talk about eat the past. It literally eats whatever happened. Like, and you don't remember what happened to you an hour ago,
Right.
right? And one of the phenomena that goes along with that is this idea that we have these fever beliefs that run through people. And it feels like everyone believes this thing that nobody believed a minute ago. Now everyone believes it. And what is so incredible is that actually a month later, nobody believes that either, or nobody's interested in that either.
Mm.
And I don't know what we make of that. And I don't know um, I don't know how that ultimately matures and bakes, but it does feel to me like it's not only about political ideas. We're seeing this in all aspects of American behavior. We see this with beauty trends. You see this with trends in education, with lingo. The lingo that kids use now is different than the lingo that they used 3 years ago. That quickness is, I mean, that's really quick. It's really fast. And so I think we're just moving quickly through trends in all aspects of American life.
Well, the perpetual now is not the same as building a future.
Yeah,
If you're saying that one of the requirements of a successful society is that it be forward looking, um, then I think we would have to add to your description of the ills, not only looking too much at the past, but looking too much at the present,
correct.
being too focused on the lingo of today, right? The fad of today. I mean, I don't know about you, but I whacked myself in the face with a hammer several times before the show just to make sure that I could appropriately mog. I can't. I got nothing. Um, but yeah, the future requires effort. The future requires planning. The future requires work. And that means a vision. I mean, it becomes kind of biblical. It's like lift up now thine eyes, right? It's get out of this and up to that.
It's also just like the thing is, we've made this kind of Lovecraftian, bureaucratic reality where everything is controlled for you.
Yeah.
I remember I I have a I was in rural New York and I was talking to somebody I knew. And this was years ago. It was probably during COVID. And he said to me, he was talking to me, and he said, Alana, let me ask you something. If you had a house up here and a tree in the area abutting your neighbor's house was burned to the ground, what would you do? It was arson. You knew it was burned to the ground. What would you do? And I said, I'd call the police. And he said, why would you call the police? Why wouldn't you go over to your neighbor's house and ask them what happened to the tree? And I said, well, what happens if he has a gun? He said, and he's like, I'm trying to play something out with you. And as he played it out, he exposed more and more of my own sense that somebody else was in control of my life. There was some
Mhm.
authority that had to be called in. And I couldn't actually myself go and get to the root of something that happened on my own property. And he's the gentlest, nicest person. And so he was not doing this with any malice or hostility at all. But at some point, he just looked at me and he was like, it's neurotic. And I felt it in my bones. There was something right about what he said, that we are so afraid of risk.
Mm.
We are so afraid of getting hurt. We are so afraid of pain that we don't do anything ourselves anymore. Building things is hard because it hurts and because you can get hurt and because you can hurt others. All of those things are true. And they make doing it risky. And there's something missing now, I think. That's the part, uh, you know, the political conversation left, right, the right wing, the left wing, like this stuff is, um, talk about the forever now. I mean, it feels endlessly present in a way that I find boring and uninspiring. But this conversation about risk and resilience and figuring out where that went in America and how to get it back feels much more exciting to me, because it also feels like an area where people who think that they're differing politically might actually find a place of connection. It feels like, I don't know, it feels rich, that soil.
Well, surely you're not risk averse. You founded a company 17 years ago and you've nurtured it and cultivated it uh, for almost 2 decades. You've been hurt. You've hurt others. I know that because I know what it means to build a company and grow it and nurture it over any period of time. Um, you've been embarrassed and you've been afraid, and you've continued to march forward. What what has driven you to do that?
Um, so, I mean, I've written a little bit about this, but um, probably not. I don't think I've discussed it in this context. Um, so, I have a son who was born almost 12 years ago, and he has a very, very rare genetic disease. And it was impossible to diagnose him. He wasn't diagnosed until he was 7.
Oh, wow.
And those 7 years were hell, actually. And the hardest thing that I have ever experienced so far. Um, and it's a very long story, which I'm happy to get into, but for a variety of reasons, um, my son's syndrome is magical and it's among the most incredible things that's ever happened to me. And it's given me a sense of understanding of purpose and work that I've never had. And it's also made me feel unbelievably excited about the state of the world and what's possible. And now I look back on it and I think I had to I had to go through that. And it was the most incredible gift. And I don't know, I'm just not at, since going through that, I'm not afraid of pain. I feel I feel it's there to teach me something. A friend of mine, when I was going through that, um, sent me this study of, I don't even know if it was true anymore. I didn't, honestly, he sent me this study during, probably during COVID, and I never checked it. So I don't know if this is true. So somebody out there, I'm sure, will fact check me. But it was basically this idea that how cortisol works in your brain, and that your stress hormones, these stress um, and fear and terror actually blow open new neural pathways in your brain, and that if you lean in to challenge and you lean into difficulty, you will give yourself a new brain. Once I understood that, I was like, this is not about not feeling it. This is not about suppressing it. It's not about avoiding it. This is about seeing if I can absorb it right. Because if I can, I have the gift of a new brain on the other side of it every time something happens to me. And so it's kind of like a woo woo, long winded way of answering your question, but that really did change my whole relationship to challenge.
So, does that mean that you've built your business primarily for personal growth?
No. So, first of all, to be perfectly accurate, Tablet's not a business. Tablet is a nonprofit and is mission oriented magazine, and that mission is to tell the truth.
But a nonprofit is a business with a complicated tax structure.
Yes. Um, and I built Tablet for I built Tablet because it was a thing I wanted to exist as a reader. I felt excited. If you think back 20 years, the internet was this fun, amazing place that we thought was going to be a great landscape for really rich, interesting, intelligent dialogue.
We were right. It just wasn't that we didn't have the full view of
Right,
it.
exactly. Um,
It gave
and
us actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf. I mean, the internet's done some good, you know?
um, I wanted to have a, I wanted to, I, what is actually true is that at the time, this is, I mean, going back 18 years or 19 years, um, I loved magazines. Magazines are particular, they're particular media. They tend to be, they have a very specific worldview.
Right.
They're like a dinner party. It's a very specific thing that you're going to with a very specific group of guests and specific food. Um, the magazines that I liked anyway. And the challenge 20 years ago was that I didn't understand two things about about the direction of magazines back then. One of which was if magazines were going to be online and they were going to give the stuff away for free, then how would they maintain the quality of the content? Because if you were going for much bigger audiences and those audiences potentially could be global, wouldn't you have to lower the common denominator?
Hmm.
And I was like, I don't get it, right? Like, why would you publish something that was distinctive or weird or specific if what you need now is a much bigger audience that can access it? And the second thing that I didn't understand is if you weren't creating an audience of distinction that had certain things in common that were special, how would you maintain a sense of exclusivity, which is what you sold to advertisers?
Hmm.
And I was like, well, all the smart people running magazine companies must know something I don't know. And so I'm just going to start this magazine as a nonprofit to insulate me from those two things as I wait to figure out the secret that they're clearly hoarding. And it turned out they didn't know what they were doing at all. like, um, so that was fine. But in the meantime, we built Tablet in this kind of safe way. And it was really meant to be what I believed magazines always were, which was a really great conversation that anybody could drop into if they wanted to. And that's why I built Tablet. And it's changed a lot over nearly 20 years, but I mean, it's obviously one of the things I'm incredibly proud of it.
How much do you program for an audience versus how much do you program for yourself?
You know, program. I don't, so we have section editors. The section editors at Tablet are incredibly powerful. I don't commission a Tablet. I hire the staff and the staff commissions, and the staff really does control a lot of it. I am very, I do my orchestration in my own ways, but I really don't Bigfoot over that commissioning. So now your question really is about them, about the writers and editors who work for Tablet. Um, I don't want to speak for every single one of them, but knowing them, I can tell you that I don't think anybody cares about the audience. I can't think of one person on my staff that wakes up every day and thinks about the audience. They think about what they find interesting.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It's really a weird kibbutz. And everybody kind of does. Everybody brings a certain expertise and a certain level, certain set of obsessions, um, and we let them run with those. And it's remarkable because it really is it's a great lesson in creative projects. The allure of somebody who is obsessed, writing about something that they're obsessed about, itself is so magnetic that even if you were never interested in Fish, the band, I mean, the number of stories about Fish I've had to edit, even if you were never interested in that, a writer who's so passionate, who's bringing such verve and such poppity pop to that piece, it's magnetic and you kind of can't look away. And I think that that's been the secret um, to Tablets maintaining audiences that come from that they're very diverse. They come from a lot of different um, demographic groups and a lot of different countries. I think they're all drawn to that particular kind of writing.
So in that way, You created something out of nothing, and you can downplay it, which I appreciate, but you're downplaying it by saying you built it in a safe way. You're downplaying it by saying it isn't a business. You're downplaying it by minimizing your own influence over it.
Am I in psychoanalysis? What is
Yeah,
happening?
of course you are. But the truth is,
Mhm,
everything's hard. Everything that you just described required enormous effort and risk taking by you.
mhm.
Uh, and creation is an act of optimism.
Absolutely.
You believe in the future.
More every day.
That's a really heterodox view in today's America, I think.
Is it? I mean, how do you we are curing diseases that have plagued humanity for hundreds of years, if not thousands, that we have records for, and they are going to be gone. We are figuring out how to rewild parts of nature. I mean, I don't understand how you could not be excited about the possibilities. And then your argument to me can be, well, we don't understand any of these technologies and they could go wrong. And my answer is, of course they could go wrong. That's the reason why I need you in it.
Mm.
If you're a person who feels mindful of the ways that technologies can go wrong, you're exactly the person that needs to lean in this moment. So you're the brake on the directions that it goes that we don't want them to go in. But the idea that we are not on a rocket ship is crazy. Of course we are. And it is, to me, that is, it's the reason to wake up and work hard every day.
You're not a partisan. I am a partisan. My biggest complaint about the right is that I understand that you need a healthy right and a healthy left in a culture. You need someone who looks out for tradition. You need someone who looks out, you need someone who's uh, reluctant to, in a society that's premised on creative destruction,
Mm-hmm.
you need someone who's reluctant to destroy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you also need a healthy left. You need someone who, as Jordan Peterson might say, looks out for the lowest people on the hierarchy, the naturally occurring or the unnaturally occurring hierarchies. You need someone who is willing to lean forward and take some risks and break some things. You need someone to be the barista. That's never going to be a conservative. You need somebody to be the cook. That's never going to be a conservative. Somebody to write the love song. That's very rarely going to be a conservative.
Mm.
In a well-balanced society, you need a healthy left and a healthy right. I don't think that means you need an equal left and an equal right. I'm a partisan. I'm a conservative. I think that you need more people of the right in a healthy culture than you need people of the left. And both left and right need to be constrained from their worst excesses, which end up kind of looking very similar. They both sort of devolve into a kind of totalitarian impulse with different textures around who exactly gets all the power. But in either one of them, it's not me. So I'm anti, left and right as extremism as extremes. But one of my criticisms of the right is that we don't generally lean forward enough. And I say that the future belongs to those who build it. And you're echoing it very much that, when I saw the wave of social media starting to emerge, I saw opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I have availed myself of the opportunity and did very well by availing myself of the opportunity. I made money. I made money for my friends. I impacted the country in I think a few very significant places by being in positions of power at particular moments when I think if we hadn't been there, and by we I mean very particularly me and my peers,
Mm-hmm.
if we hadn't been there, worse outcomes would have taken place than the ones that did. Not just if someone like us hadn't been there. No, it had to be us.
Mm-hmm.
We were the ones who had the exact admixture in those exact moments of tenacity plus delusions of grandeur plus good values plus recklessness, whatever the perfect soup was that we had in those moments. We were the people, very particular people, who were able to effectuate good outcomes in those moments in which we found ourselves in. And one of the things that I wish were true more broadly of the right, and that I hate particularly in this moment where Gen Z seems so broadly black-pilled, so convinced that they can't have positive futures, so convinced that the American dream has been foreclosed to them. Uh, I look at the world that they're being born into, and yes, I see all the challenges that they face, some of them very unique and very truly difficult. Probably never harder for a man to for a young man to meet a young woman. That's a fundamental problem that we have to solve. What an enormous challenge that all the institutions have been hollowed out by the generations before you, and you're sort of inheriting uh, a a country whose inner scaffolding is in such poor repair. Absolutely horrible thing that they're going to have to overcome. Every generation has a different set of challenges that they have to overcome, and theirs are real. But so much opportunity in front of them.
Mhm.
I saw social media happening and got involved. It took 10 years after I started paying attention to social media before the conservative high net worth class, the investors in conservatism, started saying, how come we ain't got no uh, social media? And it's like, well, because you weren't asking this question 15 years ago
Mhm.
when people were first dreaming up these ideas and they sounded crazy and abstract and you didn't think they were substantial. You didn't want to lean forward and get them. The same thing's going to happen with AI. Conservatives are going to be against AI. They're going to react against AI. And 20 years from now, they're going to say, why are all the AI companies against us? Why are all the AI companies on the left? Why are we being, well, because you're not there. And the future belongs to whoever builds it. Like I think God called us to optimism from the very earliest pages of the Bible when he says, be fruitful and multiply. That's a call to a belief in the future. It's a call to believe that you can project children out into the mist and believe that there will be something for them to stand on, right? It's a fundamentally optimistic act. And it's indicative of every act of creation, from building Tablet Magazine to uh, making a movie uh, or building rocket ships to send people to Mars or whatever's happening in the world. And if we're not there, if we're not represented, whatever we you want to draw the box around, whatever a person identifies themselves as being a part of, if you're not there, your values will not be represented by the thing that gets built. And I think that's what the whole black pill movement is ultimately about. The people doing the black pilling do believe in the future. They don't want you to believe in the future because they want to be the ones to build it. They're eliminating competition so that they can be the ones who get to determine what tomorrow looks like. And I think, man, you're going to, you're going to have to live in tomorrow. So show up and be a part of building it. I mean, that's like the fundamental orneriness of Jeremy
Hmm.
is just an absolute belief that if you take those risks, if you have that belief in tomorrow, if you have that mixture of being able to, I love how you define it as Zionism, and
Mhm.
I'll embrace your definition for today. That if you believe, if you can define what makes you different,
Mhm.
and not just you the individual, but you the individuals to whom you belong. If you can determine what makes you particular, and not just particular, but of value,
Mhm.
because you can be particularly bad. Figure out what makes you particular and good.
Mhm.
Uh, be pragmatic in the defense of those things that make you particular and good, and be optimistic and hopeful about what a future looks like if people with your particularities and goodness are involved in the making of that future. Then there's never been a better moment to be alive. I mean, what enormous opportunity awaits us all.
I always tell people that you should think about the establishment of the state of Israel was so unlikely and so otherworldly in a way
Mm.
that it has caused huge groups of people to imagine that there must have been some black arts power behind it. They can't even conceive of the fact that it was just literally like handfuls of bedraggled Jews, some of which had literally were 2 steps away from concentration camps, who just decided to, they knew what was particular about them. They knew what was connected to that piece of land, about their own history, their legacy. They were part of a people that for thousands of years, 3 times a day, mentioned that land. It was particular,
Yeah.
right? And then they just worked really, really, really hard and believed in the future. And that story was so wild and it achieved so much that people have to create conspiracy theories around it.
That's right.
And I always say to people, Build your life that way. Make your story so unlikely that actually somebody will make up a story about how you achieved it.
Hmm.
And I think that not to put you on the couch and certainly not to try to convince you out of anything, but I do think that part of your challenge is in terminology, right? The terminology of conservative kind of got a group of people into exactly the position that you just diagnosed, right? We are conservatives. Our job is to conserve. And that creates work, and the work looks a certain way. And then you miss opportunities. One of the things that a way of thinking that really did change things for me was this idea that you can kind of, um, every technological revolution brings a stress or a strain on the institutions of that society. Those institutions react differently to the waves of change. And some of them react better than others. And some of them actually respond and make themselves relevant, and others actually don't. And I always tell people that since COVID, I've started to look at institutions and or ideas or projects, and I put them in one of 4 buckets. And those buckets are um, motivated by my own energy. The first is you assess an institution, you say, this institution roughly works the way I want it to. This is good. So the energy that I put toward that institution is preserving or conserving energy because it works well and it looks like the thing I want for the future. Again, still future oriented, but I'm preserving it, right? The second thing is you can look at an institution and say, okay, this institution's really broken, but there's gold in it. So I'm going to give it a lot of energy or a lot of resources, but it's reforming energy or changing energy. It's completely different. You can give the same $2 million to a school, but $2 million of conserving dollars is very different than $2 million you give to an institution to change itself. The third bucket is, which is a bucket that I don't generally feel a lot of energy toward, but other people do, which is we have to destroy this thing. This thing is dangerous, and its existence, people who feel a lot of this energy, sort of burning things to the ground energy, will say, they'll use a metaphor of a building. This building is decrepit and it's deteriorated, and allowing people to go into it at all is irresponsible. So we have to destroy it because it's unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth is, I want to build something completely new. And all you have to do in the morning, you can be a different person every day with every institution. And you don't have to pick one. You can pick one if you're just a conserver. You can do that. Or you can say, no, I'm actually going to change based on how something inspires me. And if something inspires me to make something completely new, I can put my energy to that for 2 years. And then after those 2 years, I can go and I can help someplace reform itself. And after that, I can go and help somebody burn something to the ground that actually I think is unsafe. When you think about it that way, you think about the possibilities for your own energy and that they don't have to be one. I think that it allows, potentially, it can allow for groups of people or even movements to become more creative and to become more responsive, especially in moments of flux or change. I know no partisans like that answer, but it's mine.
Well, I'm a partisan because I think the left right distinction is an incredibly meaningful distinction, but it's not the only meaningful distinction. And within the framework of left and right, I think those other distinctions become really important. And so it's a I don't think that in the system that we have in this country in particular, that there is an end to the one institution, which is that it's a two-party system. So the each party will exist as an institution no matter what we try to do. And if you manage to destroy one of them, you won't really have destroyed one of them. You'll just have replaced it. Like when the Republican Party came into existence, the Whigs just went away. Like it always the nature of our system is it demands a division in two. Um, but that is certainly not to say that those are the only distinctions. And within the rubric of conservatism, however we're gonna map that out, I'm very liberal. I don't mean that uh, I'm not squishy on like core issues of conservatism, but I believe in maximal human freedom. I make movies, I write songs, I build businesses, I build the future. And that distinction gives me something that's sort of maybe aesthetically and temperamentally uh, m- gives me more in common with certain people on the left than it does with certain people on the right. Uh, but then there's like an underlying value structure. In my lifetime, I would say that in and this is changing right now in real time, which is a huge shakeup in our politics. But in my lifetime, it's essentially been that there's been one side of the political divide believes in the country and one side in the political divide does not believe in the country. Fundamentally, in my lifetime, the left increasingly has not believed in the country and the right has believed in the country. We're living through a moment right now where the right is beginning to increasingly not believe in the country. And probably if I'm to approach it from year four,
Mhm.
uh, the four questions that you put in front of an institution and how you're going to react to it, because I believe that the institution can't go away, sort of structurally, it can't go away, then an enormous amount of my energy has to go into reforming it. Because uh, as a simple matter of politics, while politically I oppose leftism and believe that leftism needs to be defeated politically in most political instances, you can't defeat an ascendant left without a healthy right. And right now, the right's becoming increasingly unhealthy. So that becomes a top priority for me to think about. How do I motivate my sort of fellow partisans to believe in the country again, to believe in the future again, to believe in, and I would agree that the word conservative in that sense isn't the most useful
Do you think it's
term.
different for you at the state level? Like, do you think it's do you think those conversations happen differently when you talk about state politics?
Well, sure, to some degree, although the system still divides itself. The nature of how we've structured government in this country is it always divides itself into two parties. So you're going to have a party that necessarily embraces a broad set of values and another party that's going to necessarily embrace a broad set of values. You structurally can't force a third party to exist. It can come into existence,
Yeah, no,
but it can't stay in existence.
yeah, I'm just thinking about it because in my own, I feel like there's a way in which, um, again, I sort of function in these very weird spaces,
Sure.
and those spaces tend to not be um, spaces um, are in the hamster wheel of the national political discourse. Um, I am sympathetic to it though, and I understand it. But there's a part of me that wants to sometimes look at my friends who are involved in this and say, there's like the hamster wheel of it all feels bad.
Oh yeah.
And maybe, like, not maybe you get off the wheel, by which I mean like you take some Benedict, like I don't mean like you just divorce yourself from the world, but like there has to be another way to look at things. In my life, it's, I really do follow a lot of science and technology news, and
Hmm.
I find that whole space to be very, very different. First of all, it's fun because I really don't understand a lot of it. So every day I read it and I learn something new, and that in and of itself feels good. And it's just better than listening to the same like annoying memes over and over again. But I also feel like when I think about and I track local news, it feels better somehow.
My personal life isn't all that hyper partisan. My engagement with culture isn't hyper partisan. It's not completely removed from
Right.
right. When I make a movie, it certainly contains my values,
Right.
but I don't make. I mean, I shouldn't say I don't. I made Lady Ballers, which was obviously an incredibly partisan piece. That was the joke. Uh, but Pendragon isn't partisan. It contains my values. Of course, I made it. It's me saying what I want to say into the world. But it's not, it was not fundamentally a conservative project or a fundamentally political project by any definition. So I wouldn't say that my whole life is partisan. Uh, I think that I'm inclined toward, like on the Enneagram, everybody tells me like all my friends who are hyper into the Enneagram diagnose me as an 8,
Okay.
which is the challenger contrarian. And I know why they come up with that. And by the way, universal, complete ubiquity. Everyone who loves the Enneagram and knows me says I'm an 8. But
Okay.
every time I take the test, I'm a 1, which is a reformer. So the test says I'm a 1. And whenever I report back to my Enneagram friends, like, no, you're definitely an 8. The test is wrong. Well, you're the ones who believe in the test. Like, I'm not even an Enneagram guy, but okay.
Okay.
But I think what's happening is that there's a sort of bifurcation of Jeremy. And I think religion is kind of the answer to this. That I think that I have like that Gen X orneriness of not wanting to be defined by other people. But then I also, because of religion, because of my Christianity, want to see the world or do see the world through the lens of my values. And so that makes of me a kind of highly contrary reformer, but I'm not a revolutionary. Like some reformers become real revolutionaries. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm not a burn down anything kind of guy. I'm a build the next thing kind of guy. Either fix the thing that's broken or build the next thing. You said it about yourself.
Mhm.
When it comes time to burn down something, I'm never going to be the guy. Never going to be the guy to call.
I'm not either. But that doesn't mean that I've met enough of those people. I'm just thinking about one person in particular who um, was very, very troubled by the direction of an institution that he was very involved with, um, and gave a lot of money to, and actually knew the inner workings of. And if you talk to him, he's very thoughtful about it and clearly quite devastated that he came to the conclusion that it needed to close up shop. And I understand that it's very, very hard to come to the conclusion that something that you were so involved with, that you really understood so much, actually the world would be better if it didn't exist anymore. And he's made some very thoughtful arguments about things, it's very healthy for things to die. It's very healthy for things to be. He doesn't see himself as a revolutionary or as an arsonist,
Mhm.
right? But he absolutely thinks that the world will be better once that institution closes its doors. And he works every day to try to get to a place where he can kill that institution. And I have gotten to know that impulse enough to get to a place where I'm not reflexively allergic to those people either. I understand that you can do that thoughtfully too. I understand you can also build really violently, and you
Oh
can
yeah.
build really badly, and you can build things in a dangerous way. So these four things there's no value judgment actually on any of them in my head. It's more, I'm trying to give people a panel and a way to understand their own human impulses and their own human energy and the things that might motivate and inspire them. Because to me, the thing that I would hate is I hate for people to wake up in the morning and get on X and feel like the answer is, I have no power.
Yes.
The answer is, I have nothing to do. Because my answer is, you have four choices. What do you mean you have no power? You can choose to conserve something, you can choose to reform something, you can serve to destroy something, or you can serve to build something new. You can do any of those things. You just can't do nothing.
You have agency.
Correct. And so
I'm sure that what you're saying is true. I'm sure that there is a place where, and I'm sure that even in myself, there are things that if I believed they needed to be destroyed badly enough, I would take actions to help destroy them. Uh, that's what war ultimately is, right? And war is a thing that is often bad and is sometimes good,
that's right.
right? Does the thing actually need to be destroyed? Is its destruction the only option? Can it be reformed? Uh, are there ways of getting to the positive outcome that preserve that institution's existence? If not, you go destroy it. War. So I would agree with you. Um, while it's not my natural inclination, certainly I agree with you. But I think a lot of the call to destroy things that we're hearing right now in the culture is not because the things actually need to be destroyed. There are perfectly good policy solutions to so many of the legitimate criticisms that people have about government, so many of the legitimate criticisms that people have about the culture. We very rarely these days engage in any of that policy
Yeah.
conversation because there's an actual motivated movement right now to convince people that the only agency they have is the agency to destroy, which I think that that's essentially telling people they have no agency at all
I get it.
and letting destruction be the sort of natural outcome of their belief that they have no
I
agency.
get it. And it's a very different kind of destruction than the one that I just described that my friend is engaged in,
Right.
which is it's actually destruction that involves hard work,
Yeah.
right? Destruction. And I guess that's the other thing that I would say, like, you know, just any of those four efforts that do not involve work or an
Yeah.
idea of why, how the future would be better if your preferred outcome happened, then that's pointless.
That's nihilism.
Right.
Yeah. I want to push on you just a little bit. So, this idea of Zionism as the formula for success
Mhm.
and that it's pragmatism, optimism, and particularity. Uh, how do we What do we say in an environment where that leads to the formation of ethnos, states built around ethnos, where the ethnos is defined in such a way that it's destructive for others, or even destructive for that group itself? And so one can imagine that
Mhm.
the Germans of the 1930s had a very strong ethnos,
Mhm.
and it was not particularly welcoming of people with your particular ethnos,
Mhm.
and became very, very destructive towards people with your ethnos. How could we assume that a state focusing on what makes it unique in particular, even if we grant the idea that uniqueness and particularity are part of what make the world beautiful and what give people optimism, give them hope to build the future, give them hope just to have babies, which is like the most fundamental way of building the future. And yet, like any other technology, it can be put to very bad application. What's the check against that?
So, in my read of Nazi ideology, part of the important power of it was in the very, very old folk culture that it was trying to revive.
Mhm.
It was actually a pre-Christian folk culture that the Nazis idealized and were trying to bring back. That is not a future looking, that is dark and past oriented. That's the reason why I say I don't, I find the future oriented part of this and the idealism part of this to be really important because it is the best check on some of the darker impulses. But that said, your basic premise is, well, just because you use this doesn't necessarily mean that we're all going to live in peace and light. And the answer is, of course, we're still building a world of humans, right?
Hmm.
So, yes, that's correct. And your way, we've seen every single country or many countries when they were coming into existence, countries often do not come into existence bloodlessly. Countries don't defend themselves bloodlessly. that is unfortunately part of existence,
Mm.
is that we encroach on one another. And I almost, I have a friend who, this is like, it sounds like I'm just, it sounds like I'm being maudlin or I'm trying to use an emotional appeal, but it really is the thing I thought when you were talking. I have a friend who had a baby who was stillborn, and I was I didn't even know what to say to her, honestly, when I went to the hospital. I
Mm.
didn't know what to say. And she just looked at me and she said, "I am so happy I did that." And I was like, "Are you kidding?" And she was like, I experienced him. I met him. And she didn't not go through pain. It's just life, man. Like, it's there's pain, there's war, there's disease, there's death. These are things, they're part of the human condition. And life has meaning because it has risk and it has bad things that happen in it. And I would say that I would like to be part of a country that understands its ethnos and understands what its ethnos is not. I don't want to be part of an empire. I want to be part of a country. I want to be part of a nation. And those things are different. That's me. Some other people want to be part of empires. Some other people want to be part of tribes. Some like different people want to be part of different things. So go be part of whatever you want to be part of. My feeling is just do it. Like, have meaning, bring meaning to your identity, bring meaning to the identity of others around you, make something. And to me, some of the best things to make right now are countries.
Yeah, one of the things you say in your piece is that the nation, like the wheel, is an invention that becomes more important, not less important with time.
I think so too.
Mm.
I really do. I think that's right. I think that there's part of what I tried to think about a little was what's the best way for humans to be organized? We've been organized in lots of different ways. We were nomadic to start, and we would follow animals. And then at some point we were like, wait a minute, what happens if we stay put and the animals come to us? Which, of course, is the most radical change in human existence because now you had land that you had to defend. But it also meant that you had land that could inspire you and land that could organize your existence and land that could actually contribute to who you were. And now you have a relationship to land. Then you have the building of cities. Then you have the building of empires. In all of those, I really do believe that on this globe, the nation state is a optimal form of organizing
And in particular,
ourselves.
the ethnos nation state.
Ethnostates.
Ethnos states.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that um, as a diagnosis of the problems that we see in the world, uh, the lack of happiness, the lack of motivation, the fact that people don't have children, um, you've really hit on something unique. And I mean, it's a very unique observation, and I think can be a very important one. I I do wonder why you in your writing you seem to lean toward people like Modi and Milei
Mm-hmm.
and away from people like Orban, for example,
Mm-hmm.
who also, I mean, Viktor Orban recognizes what's particular about Hungarians.
Mm-hmm.
It's not strictly geographic. He believes that, and obviously there's challenges to this belief, but he believes, for example, that half of Hungarians live in Romania. Uh, he had an aesthetic vision for Hungary. I mean, interesting. I lived there for half a year
Okay.
making the Pendragon cycle, and I didn't engage with politics at all while I was there. Um, I saw lots of protests against Orban that would take place, which uh, indicated to me that some form of democratic processes were still very much active in the country because there was no crackdown on people's ability to protest him. But he transformed his party transformed Budapest They took all the horrible brutalist Soviet architecture and put new facades on all of the buildings that brought a kind of classical European beauty to it that really did, I would say, sort of lift the city out of a kind of Cold War darkness and lifted the spirit when you were there. Even compared to more modern European cities, uh, which were also built in a capitalist brutalist kind of aesthetic, there's something truly, truly beautiful and inspiring about what was happening in Budapest and watching it take place. So he recognizes what's particular about being Hungarian. He has a sort of aesthetic vision for the future of his country. He has a sort of pragmatic vision to defend his country, almost uniquely, not completely Poland and some stuff, but very nearly uniquely defended what's unique about Hungary from the the greater European project and the immigration that's flooded into Europe. What's the criticism? Why does he not make your sort of list of people applying Zionism?
I you can add another feature to Orban, which is that he is close with the current Israeli administration. Um, so then you imagine that he might fall into my definition, and maybe he does. I don't know. To me, I feel that there is um, there's a qualitative difference between certain conservative figures and conservative parties that feel past oriented to
Mhm.
me. They feel like their whole purpose is to revive some glorified past. And don't, I am not drawn to that at this moment.
Make America Great Again doesn't resonate with you.
I find myself looking for leaders who feel hopeful.
Hmm.
I find myself looking for leaders in all aspects, in culture, in politics, in activism, in America, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia. I scan for people who feel like they're excited for the future and they're driven by a joy that is palpable. And to me, that's kind of what I was looking for when I was assessing
Yeah.
these leaders is I was looking for somebody who feels um, they feel like you can almost sense the heat of happiness coming off of them because it does feel by the way it's like I just need to make something clear, which is because some people unlike you, some people who don't read the piece think that what I was trying to say is that Israeli society is perfect, and it's like couldn't be farther from the truth. It's not a calm, peaceful, or perfect society internally, and it is certainly lacking in, let's say, a rich, deep bench of creative leadership there. Hopefully, that will change, but it does feel to me like there's a feeling of joy.
Mhm.
Everybody complains in that country. Every single person from the minute you get off the plane, everyone's complaining to you.
It's a whole country full of Jews.
It's and not only that, the Israeli Arabs complain. Everyone
Yeah.
complains to you, right?
Yeah.
This is not, so that's not what I mean. I don't mean that you get off the plane and everyone's like in la la land, but there is a sense of joy.
Yeah.
And I feel that you can't really, I don't know how you build without making people feel happy about what they're building.
Hmm.
So that's what I was looking for.
There's this moment that probably a lot of people saw it, but I watched a lot of the footage during the Artemis mission. You just
Yeah.
turn on Netflix and it's just on all day, right? And there's this moment where uh, the Orion had splashed down and the divers went to open up the hatch. The guys have the four astronauts have been 10 days, out of our gravity, and they've been in the water for, I don't remember how long, maybe an hour. I mean, they were in the water much longer than they thought they would be. And finally, the divers open the hatch and they climb in. Of course, I don't know what to expect. Like everyone else alive, no one has come back from the moon in my lifetime. Not everybody alive, everybody our
Right.
age.
Right.
Nobody's come back from the moon in my lifetime. So I thought they would help them out, but instead the divers went in to the capsule, which is very tiny.
Right.
And I got incredibly choked up.
Nervous.
Well, no, I was moved to tears by this moment where the diver goes on and starts speaking to them by name. And in that moment, I realized, oh, well, not only has the diver trained for this mission, he's trained with these astronauts. Like, this is so particular. Uh, and there were 6 minutes. And who am I kidding? There were 10 days. From the minute that they strapped themselves on to the biggest bomb ever made by man, basically, the biggest rocket controlled explosion ever built by man, and fired off into the harsh vacuum of space, at any moment, a pinprick in the hull of that vessel and they're dead. But then there's 6 minutes where they're even out of contact with the Earth during reentry. And I'm sure you know this, but the ceramic heat tiles had failed to some degree on the first uncrewed Artemis mission, and so they had determined that they didn't have time to fix them. So instead, they would bring the capsule in at a steeper angle, which essentially means they were flying home in a ship that had never been tested under these circumstances for the most dangerous moment of the mission. And this diver doesn't just know his job, he knows them. And he's adrenalized, of course, and they're adrenalized. So when he's saying their names, he's saying them loudly, and you feel this exuberance and this joy and this relief coming from him to these men with whom he's trained for this incredible moment, and probably trained for much worse potential outcomes as well, right? And I don't know, something about that tiny moment of human interaction just overwhelmed me. And I think about all acts of creative optimism. You were talking earlier about the formation of the state of Israel against all laws. It's so much that they have to create a conspiracy to even understand how it could have possibly happened. You think, of course, because only the only way you could take the job of being one of the 4 men in that capsule, 3 men and a woman, 2 men, a Canadian and a woman. I want to be very particular. The only way you could take the job of being one of the divers who would swim out there to rescue, to pull them out of this capsule. The only way you could engage in any of those risks is to believe that the damn thing might just go to the moon, come back, and splash down safely in the water. It might work. And because it might work, we can absorb the fact that it also might not.
So I am so glad you brought up Artemis, because it was such a high for me.
Oh,
And I remember when there was finally footage of them, it might have even been footage of that diver, but when it was finally clear that that mission had been a success, I went on X, and there was some dumbass, sorry,
on
who was
X?
like, right, who was like, well, I'm glad we can go to the moon. Can we get my pothole fixed? And I very rarely have the impulse of like wanting to go to someone's house and sit them down.
Yeah.
But I really felt like this person has no idea that the reason we're going to eventually fix his pothole is because we went to the moon.
Mm.
You absolute moron. Like, the reason why America can do good things locally is because we do great things beyond. This disconnection feels to me, I'm sorry to say, I don't mean this as a criticism, certainly not of you or anybody else, but like this, our partisan politics has made people so dumb.
Mm.
They don't understand what they're even asking for. They don't even know whether they are right or left. They don't understand that they should be rooting for the moon. That is what's going to give them everything that they want. And somehow we've gotten all scrambled.
Yeah.
And the disaggregation of our media environment has really kind of broken everyone's brains into tiny shards. And people don't even really understand what their own ideology is.
No.
And I looked at that image of those people coming back, and I thought to myself, that is everything. And if we can't have, if somebody can't figure out a way to distribute the news so that people see the magic of that moment, that's going to be, I think, our big challenge in the next 10 years. We have to figure out how to make everybody see what we just saw.
Yeah. In that same week was the rescue operation in Iran for the weapons systems officer of the F-15 the American F-15 that had been shot down. And I had a very similar moment to your pothole moment, just watching the sort of European reaction to that rescue operation, where people were saying, we're grown adult men were saying, you lost 2 C-130s and 2 helicopters and a A-10, and you're calling this a successful operation to save 1 man? And I was just like, yes.
Of course.
If we had lost...
What are the machines for?
What are they for? By the way, and if we had lost a dozen soldiers.
Right.
In our volunteer-only military who chose to put themselves on the line to save one of their brothers, who would have willingly went into danger to pull that 1 man out. And if we had lost a freaking aircraft carrier, like, yes, that's what makes us good. That's what makes, that's why your pothole's going to get fixed. And maybe you don't think we should be in Iran, or maybe you've got whatever your political opinions. I'm not even talking about the politics of it. I'm talking about the sheer human tenacity and goodness that says we will do the hardest thing for the best reason. That is the most virtuous. Those are like 2 of the most virtuous moments that we've gotten to witness in the last decade. We witnessed them in the same week.
Right. And you don't even have to get spiritual with people. If you want, I can explain to you how the projection of American power affects our economic capacity.
Of course.
And the diminution of American power globally affects our economic capacity. And we can talk about all the fraud. We can talk about all the misallocation of funds. We can talk about state governments. We can talk about whatever you want. But the bottom line is that we're part of a very big country with a very big economy. And the way that we function globally determines the strength of that collective.
Right.
And somehow, and I know how, and I want to be, I am sympathetic to younger generations, including, by the way, I would consider my own generation part of a group of people who witnessed an unmooring of certain American principles, and who, I think, witnessed complicated foreign escapades that
Certainly.
that have been interpreted in ways that I think emotionally interpreted by America in ways that I understand and I'm sympathetic to and I engage with. That said, so I almost feel like I can halfway excuse not understanding I can excuse for sure not understanding our engagement with Iran generally. I can maybe excuse not understanding Artemis, maybe, even though I think it's just a total lack of imagination.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I'm sort of like, are you actually awake? But fine, right? I can't actually understand anyone who says, why did we sacrifice planes for a human? That person, I don't understand. I don't get it.
Yeah.
The planes are there for the people. And
the people are there for each other.
Of course. That's the part where I'm like, I'm not sure I can do anything with that person. I can really, I have a wide range of people I can talk to. I can talk to people of lots of differing opinions, but I'm not sure I would know. I can't get purchase on a conversation with somebody who would say something like that.
Yeah. And I think this is why your cultures are dying. And our culture's in so much trouble. Our culture has so many problems. But we're still the culture that did those two things in 1 week. So whatever the ethnos of America is, or whatever the ethnos of America is going to become in this moment
Mhm.
of transition, we happen to occupy a country that sent people to the moon and splashed them down in the ocean, and that was willing to expend enormous treasure and take enormous risk to save one service member. That is a country that still possesses fundamental goodness, and that is not a country that needs to be burned down. That's a country that needs to be reformed, certainly. It's a country that needs to be. We still need to build new things, certainly. But the sort of politics and attitude of despair that defines the moment that we live in now has to go. And I actually hope that something you said earlier in the conversation is true. Maybe the best thing you can say about the moment in which we live is that maybe this despair is just as shallow as all the other ideas. Maybe the anti-Semitism that's ascendant right now is just as shallow as so many of the other ideas. Maybe uh, maybe the entire black pill movement. Maybe we'll look back in 2028 and say that's so 2026, right? Like it'll just be, or whatever the lingo of young people at that time will be. Snippy snap 26, man. I don't know, 6, 7, I don't know. But maybe it'll just be a distant memory, and we'll live in a more hopeful time because the reasons to have hope are all around us.
I think so. I think that I, but the one thing I will say is um, anti Semitism emerges in societies in stress.
Mhm.
It's a symptom, not a cause. And when I think about, I don't believe in combating anti Semitism. I don't think that is a thing that works. Um, I, it's sort of like curing cancer. You can cure specific kinds of cancer if you get really granular about that specific
Right.
disease and you get creative and you get really local about it. Um, and I believe that there are ways to combat all kinds of prejudices, including anti Semitism, that can sometimes work at local, isolated levels. But as an idea, anti-Semitism it's a big flashing red light that your people are unhappy and that something is demoralizing them. That is much more. I'm concerned about that because I'm an American and I'm concerned about Americans and I worry about why they're so unhappy. That's where I want to figure out. That's why I spend a lot of time trying to figure out, like, why are people unhappy? Where are they unhappy? At what points in their life are they unhappy? And then people say to me, Americans are fine. They're fine. Okay, why aren't we having babies?
Yeah.
Like, you can't tell me you're fine. It's like you're telling me you're fine and you're bleeding out of all your orifices. Like, you're not fine. And I want us I think that it's incumbent upon people who lead institutions, who lead industries, to ask themselves those questions. Not so much like whatever people are having, whatever people's opinions or whatever memes are on X today, they're expressions of something deeper. And I'm more curious to understand why that is. Why aren't people, how many people did watch that Artemis? How many Americans watched that, saw that vision that we saw?
How many kids do you have?
So I have 2 stepkids and I have
You
one son.
and I have one daughter. So you and I belong to a generation, the greatest
The
generation.
greatest generation.
We,
We actually are going to save everyone.
yeah,
They just don't know it.
that's right. We both only have one
Biological child. Yeah.
and mine's not biological, but
Right. Both.
we've both only made the choices that led to one child. You made
Okay.
choices to marry into 2 others.
Okay.
Okay. So you and I are below replacement,
Mhm.
way below replacement.
Mhm.
I would only push back on this idea that I don't think that's because, for our generation, I don't think it's because we weren't happy. I think that there was a unique moment in human history where, sort of for the first time, it became an option not to have
Mhm.
children. And we rapidly evolved as a civilization, a series of, and some of it was very politically motivated, but I think some of it was actually just a reaction to this dramatic change technologically that had happened. And we sort of evolved a framework around the virtue of not getting married, of delaying marriage, the virtue of delaying parenthood, the virtue of small families. And I think it proved itself to be shallow. It proved itself to be wrong and immensely consequential. There's going to be there's enormous downside. Um, there's an enormous downside that's going to have to be paid. Uh, and I think we're kind of now getting to a place as a civilization. And listen, there were Mormons and Catholics the whole time telling us we're wrong,
Mhm.
but they weren't the dominant, and Jews, but they religious Jews in particular, but they weren't dominant. I mean, religious Jews aren't dominant anywhere on earth. Uh, Probably even in Israel, they're not dominant. Um,
They're getting there.
they're getting there. But they just weren't the dominant part of this culture. And so we went through this 40-year window where I was just sort of taught you don't want to get married early, you don't want to have kids. Even people who should have known better, like my parents or whatever,
Mhm.
my grandpa, they all kind of were entertaining this new world where that wasn't the preferred outcome. And now we're kind of coming out the other end and realizing, well,
Mhm.
that was bad.
Mhm.
But I just don't think for our generation that it's necessarily true that you can say it was some sort of lack of optimism about the future, or some sort of unhappiness as a culture.
I also think that it's very, very different to talk about things at a population level or at a mass level versus things at a personal level,
Sure.
right? So lots of people have can't have children, right?
Of course.
Or don't or didn't see themselves as having children, and that person isn't necessarily unhappy. It's when you start to see a whole society making these changes and then not correcting themselves when they realize where the changes got them,
Yeah.
that you start to now have to pivot your own assessment of what that means, right? So I also think that there are things that can happen at a mass level that people don't understand themselves to be doing.
Mhm.
And so again, I agree with you. I don't think that I didn't see myself as unhappy, and I wasn't unhappy.
Now, certainly, if I could go back in time, I would have had more. I would have had more kids.
Right. And so it's like, and by the way, that even that you don't need to say, right? I don't, because again, I'm not talking about you personally, this person
Yeah.
personally, that person personally. And by the way, that's this the idea that everyone's choices mean the same thing in religious communities can be incredibly oppressive, right? Because then it's like if you don't have 5 or more kids, you
Right.
are
Something's
something's
wrong
wrong with you, right? So these aren't meant to be prescriptive at an individual level. They're meant to be descriptive of societies.
with you. Yeah. And I'm not pushing back completely, but I do think even if you're trying to be descriptive as a society, the first generation that didn't have replacement rate, that didn't reproduce at replacement rate, I think was a
You can consider that a
cultural
hiccup.
shift. It's a hiccup.
You can consider that, but and if we were seeing a younger generation in mass ways
Coming out the other side.
coming out the other side and realizing it,
Yeah.
that and maybe we will see that, and maybe we will be able to reassess and see that the situation is moving in a different way, but right now we don't see that yet.
Yeah. But that I completely agree with. Like, I do think that there was a unique moment in time where we thought novelly about this question, and incorrectly. But it wasn't a reflection. It was a reflection of technological change and cultural change in relation to that, not necessarily a sign that we were had given up on our future, had given up on ourselves. And I think we were wrong. If it persists, then it can only be persisting either because we're willfully refusing to learn the lesson that the hiccup may have otherwise taught us, or because we've given up on the future and given up on ourselves. So that I would certainly agree with.
I also remember reading, it's probably 25 years ago, there was a 20 years ago, I don't remember when, there was a novel, every so often there's like a novel based on some woman's Upper East Side life. There's a
Yeah.
new one every whatever, however many years.
Yeah.
And there was one, again, I think it was like 20 years ago, around 20 years ago. And she had this one line that I'll never forget. She talks about how the way to, the way that one of the markers of the billionaire class, as opposed to just people who had tens or hundreds of millions, was that they had more than 4 kids or more than 3 kids even. And actually, that middle level, which even included people who were real, what
Very rich.
anybody could see as really, really rich, they were having 2 kids. And I was struck by it. I thought to myself, wow, that's incredible that actually the only people having 3, 4, 5 kids were billionaires
Mm.
or people who had hundreds of millions of dollars. And I just remember thinking to myself, why is that? And I don't even think I don't know that anyone was truly alive to it themselves. Obviously, this novelist was, but sometimes there are things that we are a part of trends that mean something to us personally that are different from what they mean at a mass level.
Yeah. Social proof is an enormous driver of human behavior too. So you look around at the other people who are like you, you
Right.
know,
You just
and
do
what do
what
you
they
see?
do. But the truth is that the most important thing, which is just like the most important thing that we've touched on this entire conversation, is that Gen X is the best generation.
And how?
And that it is, I don't want to tell anyone because I don't want any pressure on us and I don't want to feel any responsibility for it. But it is obvious that we're going to fix everything.
You've written 3 incredibly influential essays. I mean, you've written far more than that, but you've written 3, I think, really breakout influential essays. Everything's broken, brokenness, Zionism for everyone. They sort of form an arc.
Hmm.
I don't know if that was sort of deliberate or if that's just the journey you've been on.
Hmm.
You're a mother to 2 adopted children and mother to 1 biological child. You're a wife. You've created a successful, I'll call it a business, even if you don't, very successful magazine that's um, promulgated a lot of really important ideas and conversations in the culture. You've become very uh, involved even in you know medicine and the ethics around emerging medicines as part of your sort of probably, I'm sure, personal motivations related to your son,
Hmm.
but also I think your interest in technology and your interest in the future.
Hmm.
What do you hope you're remembered for?
Um, I hope I'm remembered differently by different people, which I think we all feel.
Mm.
I don't want to be remembered the same by even by people I work with whom I'm very close, as I hope to be remembered by my stepdaughter. Um, but I do, I, I do hope that everybody remembers that I loved life and that I think that it is the most incredible gift and that it is an unbelievable privilege to be able to have it and to have the capacity to make it better for yourself and for others. And that no amount of your own struggle is not worth that gift.
Mm.
And some people will remember that as my idealism or naivete if you're not being generous to me. um, then some people will remember it as hope. But it is the thing that I hope runs through both my professional and personal lives.
Alana Newhouse, thank you.
Thanks for having me.